Guys, Brandon Royval and Brian Ortega spoiled the fiesta down in Mexico City. Both fighters were 0-1 versus their respective opponents coming into these matchups. So now the score's even. Which performance impressed or surprised or both you the most? Danny?
This one's a tough one because I want to give Brandon Royval so much praise because he took the fight on short notice. Against somebody who had who he had already lost to. Sorry, but man, I gotta highlight Brian Ortega here. I'll admit it, and I'll admit that I was wrong here. I had said on my Spanish YouTube channel that I just had so many concerns around Brian Ortega, and I honestly didn't expect him to be the same fighter. That Brian Ortega that we once knew, I felt like that was a thing of the past. He had gone through so many wars, 33 years old, 2 shoulder injuries, had multiple surgeries, a year plus layoff. Plus, you're going to fight Jair Rodriguez in Mexico at altitude. And from what I understand, he did not train at high altitude. He showed up the Friday before the event, like the week before. So I just thought like everything was stacked against Brian Ortega, and I just didn't expect to see him doing what he did. And then you see him roll his ankle literally like seconds before the fight starts. I'm like, all right, yeah, he's done. But look, he went out there. He took a proper beating like a true Mexican in that first round, and then came back to win the second and submitted the third. Look, I wouldn't say he over exceeded my expectations in terms of the previous version of Brian Ortega that I had in my mind, but he looked vintage Brian Ortega, still tough as hell, really durable, excellent jiu-jitsu. I think his takedowns improved a little bit. The dude's a threat, and the dude is back. I don't know how much of Brian Ortega has left at 33, but I do think at least we're going to get a year or two. He like completely surpassed my expectations, and I think we got a very interesting player now back at 145 pounds.
Mm-hmm. It is a tough question for sure. Both guys stepped up, man. How about you, Goes? Who impressed or surprised you the most between Brandon Royval and Brian Ortega?
Nightmare question, man. When I saw this pop up, even right now as I'm speaking, I still don't even know that I have a definite answer. But really, when you play through it all, Ortega hurting himself, before it even starting, his mindset is what I think has changed here a little bit. The confidence is just absolutely oozing out of him, and once the fight started, having to go through his ankle, as Kenny's showing us right now, like having to go through that. And then kind of getting pieced up early on. Like, it's not like we can look at Yair Rodriguez and say he had an off night. Like, he had a pretty good night. Brian Ortega dug deep. He came back, and he was able to get the finish in that fight. I just think that says so much about him. If you look at Royval's case, like, he smothered Brandon Moreno. That I haven't seen people do that too much to Brandon Moreno, where they're able to kind of make him defensive the whole night. He didn't have the opportunity really to do much offensive because Brandon Royval just didn't quit on short notice too. The guy's cardio was just absolutely amazing in that fight. He was the bigger underdog of the two. So, man, it's so tough. I think in the end, because Ortega just kind of showed us that he can maybe continue to do stuff like this. He still has to shore up some things, some deficiencies in his game. But, man, the guts to come back and get the finish, I think I lean Ortega just a little bit.
Mm-hmm. All right. How about you, Matt Wells? I know it's a tough one, man. Both guys really, really stepped up. And feel free to say neither one of those guys. The black shirt up, and he also had a good night. But no, really, what'd you think here, man, between these two?
No, it's a tough question to answer, definitively, because both guys really had incredible performances, man. But I lean a little bit more towards Brandon Royval. The volume that he was able to put on Brandon Moreno and just keep going at that altitude as well. Like 500 punches, like, is crazy volume, even if a lot of those were hitting the guard of Moreno. But that volume really stifled what Brandon Moreno's, was trying to do, and he couldn't really get his offense going. So you just kind of overwhelmed a guy with that pressure and that volume and that pace. You're going to not only win a lot of fights, but I mean, you're going to look really impressive doing it. And you look at his record, man, Brandon Royval, he's only lost in the UFC to Brandon Moreno before and the current champion in Pantoja. He's lost twice. So getting that third matchup is going to be tough. But man, I think between those two, between T-City and Raw Dog here, I'm leaning Raw Dog because now not only does he put himself in an interesting position, but he also puts the man he beat in an interesting position as well, because I've seen a whole lot of questions from fans about where does Brandon Moreno go from here? You know, what was wrong with him? Like, everybody was questioning his performance. And I mean, you just got to give Raw Dog credit, man. Like, it's hard to overcome a guy that's throwing 500 punches at you for 25 minutes.
For sure. And we'll go back to you, Matt, and let's just go with the follow-up here. UFC Noche is going to take place at the Sphere in Las Vegas. It's actually a pay-per-view, so it's going to be a pretty big event. Now, I'm sure it'll have a title fight or whatever at the top of the bill, and who knows if Ortega just may have walked into one. I don't know. But what I want to know is, do you want to see trilogies out of these matchups, and would that be the night to do it?
I mean, why not? Why not? I mean, we're talking about an event that's going to be a memorable one from presentation aspect. So why not? Let's get some trilogies on there. Trilogies are historic, matchups. So, whichever way you want to go with it, I'm here for it, man. I think Pantoja and Raw Dog. I mean, why not? Let's put a title fight on there. It's gonna be that pay-per-view like you mentioned. I think that would be a good one to do. But there are other good options. I mean, I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how it all shakes out. But yes, to answer your question, I'm in on that.
There are some options. Joseph Boza is participating in the chat. He's saying Henry Cejudo wants Brandon at UFC 306. So yeah, maybe just one of the two. But Goes, how about you, man? Option A would be both. Option B would be one of the two, and you can tell us who. Or option C is like, nah.
I think one of the two. We're so rematch heavy in the UFC. I don't even know that Brandon Moreno knows there's other people in his weight class. I mean, he's been fighting the same guys over and over. So he might be going, Henry Cejudo, who's that? Like, he just sees the same names over and over again. So I would say maybe one out of the two.
Yes, I remember when we had Moreno on, dude. We must have his last 12 fights have been like 4 dudes.
Yeah.
You're right. All right, how about you, Danny? What do you warm to here? Both, none, or one of the two?
I would say one. I also think we're a bit early. Like, we're pretty far out from September. I would assume that most of those guys would want to fight again before Noche UFC. So yeah, we'll see. But give me one. Give me one.
Mm-hmm.
You know who we got to get on there is that dude in the crowd. He had 2 knockouts, man. Get him on the contender.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
That dude dropped the punch.
He sure did. And there must be some openings at that arena for security if anyone's looking for JOB, because no one was interested in stopping that. Josh Wallace in the chat says, exactly, does Albazi have the draw? Albazi was supposed to be, factored in here, making a title run, but I think I heard a neck surgery from one of the guys, Nolan or Mike, on last week's show. So yeah, neck injury. So we'll see what happens there.